Hi, my name is Jeff Reiland, and I want to talk with you about creating meaningful mentor relationships. This is not going to be a presentation that gives you step-by-step how-to, but just a step back and a way of, or several ways maybe, of thinking about the value of the relationships that you're forming with the mentees that you have at the school. I want to start off by just asking a question that I think many of us ask, especially coming out of a science background. Are we really making a difference when we take time out of our busy weeks to go to school, to meet with kids, whether it's in the cafeteria or their classroom, when we are trying to shuffle things around in our otherwise really busy days? Are we really making a difference? I hope to answer that question today. Also, I think that sometimes we struggle with really understanding our own expectations for what this mentoring experience can be like. And so I want to just give you an opportunity to think about what those expectations are and how you imagine that relationship is going to unfold, or perhaps is unfolding if you've been doing this for a while. And so this little session, this little video, I hope gives you some food for thought, if nothing else. How do you measure if you're making an impact in the life of a child when you're mentoring them? I think that's a really important question, and I wish we had a really easy answer. And I think that we're working on trying to figure out how to measure the number of referrals to the Office for Behaviors, the improvement in academics, teacher observations. Those things take time. Some of those are achievable. Some of those are more difficult to get at because of HIPAA regulations. But I think that we need a little bit, maybe a broader perspective of how we measure impact in anything we do. And we only need to look at our own parent-child relationships, our own friendship relationships. How do we measure the meaning of those? How do you measure the value, for example, of a smile? How do you measure the value of somebody taking the time to talk with you when you're having a rough day, or just to check in and give you an affirmation, something you did well? It's not something that we can, tabulate. I have a colleague here who once asked me if we could create a device that could, be meaningful in relationships, especially between parents and children, what the device would be. And I would want something that looks a little bit like a Fitbit that could calculate the number of positive interactions to negative interactions that parents and children have, so that at the end of the day, they could just push a button, and rather than tell them how many steps they walked that day, it would tell them how many warm fuzzies, how many positives that they had when they were engaging their child versus correcting, criticizing, commanding, all the stuff that's such a common part of parenting. I think many parents would perhaps give pause and wonder about what they could do differently. And that's really a whole separate topic on parenting. But I think for all of us, it's just a point, how do we measure anything that we're trying to do? I want to start with a story. The Little Prince. Many of you are very familiar with it. It is one of the best stories written in the 20th century by a French author, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and he's a wonderful writer. He wrote this in 1943 at the height of World War II, and I'm only going to read a small part of it, but this piece that I want to read to you really captures, I think, the essence of the relationship that we're forming with the mentees that we have. And it gives you some food for thought if you want to read the rest of the book. But these are the two chapters that I want to read. They're very short. The first one, chapter 20. But it happened that after walking for a long time through sand and rocks and snow, the little prince at last came upon a road, and all roads lead to the abodes of men. "Good morning," he said. He was standing before a garden all abloom with roses. "Good morning," said the roses. The little prince gazed at them. They all looked like his flower. He was overcome with sadness. His flower had told him that she was the only one of her kind in all the universe, and here were 5,000 of them, all alike, in one single garden. Then he went on with his reflections. "I thought I was rich with a flower that was unique in all the world, and all I had was a common rose. A common rose and 3 volcanoes that come up to my knees, and one of them perhaps extinct forever. That doesn't make me a very great prince." And he laid down in the grass and cried. Chapter 21. It was then that the fox appeared. "Good morning," said the fox. "Good morning," the little prince responded politely, although when he turned around, he saw nothing. "I am right here," the voice said, "under the apple tree." "Who are you?" asked the little prince, and added, "You're very pretty to look at." "I am a fox," the fox said. "Come and play with me," proposed the little prince. "I'm so unhappy." "I cannot play with you," the fox said. "I am not tamed." "Ah, please excuse me," said the little prince, but after some thought he added, "What does that mean, tame?" "You do not live here," said the fox. "What is it you're looking for?" "I am looking for men," said the little prince. "What does that mean, tame?" "Men," said the fox. "They have guns and they hunt. It's very disturbing. They also raise chickens. These are their only interests. Are you looking for chickens?" "No," said the little prince. "I'm looking for friends." "What does that mean, tame?" "It is an act too often neglected," said the fox. "It means to establish ties." "To establish ties?" "Just that," said the fox. "To me, you are still nothing more than a little boy who is just like 100,000 other little boys, and I have no need of you. And you, on your part, have no need of me. To you, I am nothing more than a fox like 100,000 other foxes. But if you tame me, then we shall need each other. To me, you will be unique in all the world, and to you, I shall be unique in all the world." "I'm beginning to understand," said the little prince. "There is this flower. I think that she has tamed me." The fox gazed at the prince for a long time. "Please tame me," he said. "I want to very much," the little prince replied, "but I have not much time. I have friends to discover and a great many things to understand." "One only understands the things that one tames," said the fox. "Men have no more time to understand anything. They buy things already made up at the shops, but there is no shop anywhere where one can buy friendship. And so men have no friends anymore. If you want a friend, tame me." "What must I do to tame you?" said the little prince. "You must be very patient," replied the fox. "First you will sit down at a little distance from me like that in the grass. I shall look at you out of the corner of my eye, and you will say nothing. Words are a source of misunderstandings. But if you sit a little closer to me every day." Those are the favorite parts of of reading that book for me. And I think they have a lot of meaning just in understanding friendship. Of course, this is a novella written for children, but it has so many powerful adult themes and messages for relationships that we can think about and I think apply to our work with the mentees that we have, especially when we are meeting with them and maybe they seem a little standoffish, that they're not really sure what to make of us and we're not really sure how to interact with them. It seems like we come from very different places in the world, and in fact we do. We're decades apart in our age, and maybe it seems like oceans apart in our socioeconomic standing. We're just in very different places. And so they're not quite sure what to make of us. And so the words of the fox, instructing the little prince to give him space, but just be present and be nearby and to be quiet, can be a really important point to be thoughtful about or be comfortable about in your own work with the mentees that you work with. So that's one thing I guess I want you to think about, is how we form those relationships and what that means to tame the children, or to be tamed by the children in the relationships that we have in the program that we're having at Hamilton School. The other image that I want you to think about is that of flying a kite. And for many of you, I'm sure that you've flown kites when you were children. Perhaps you've been able to do that as adults with your own children, or maybe just by yourself. It is a fun thing to do. I still enjoy flying kites as an adult. But one of the things that I think we forget about is what keeps that kite in the air. I mean, the obvious thing is, well, of course, you need wind to fly a kite, but kites don't stay in the air by themselves. They need to have that anchor, the person holding the string. And without that person holding the string, that kite would fall to the ground. It wouldn't keep flying up. It would eventually fall to the ground because it needs to have that tension. And I want you to think about that string as the connection between the kite and the person holding it, as that connection between the child and the mentor, like the relationship between a parent and a child or an adult and a child. It's almost like this invisible cord. And if you go to a park and you watch kids playing in a park and their mom or dad are on the park bench, and hopefully they're not on their cell phone, but they're actually watching their child, the child will go off and explore a little bit, maybe pick some flowers, bring them back and show the parent, and then they'll turn their back and they'll go over again and explore some other part, pick up some stones or some bark or some grass and bring it back. And it's that constant going back and forth, that confidence that the parent is always going to be there, that the connection is there and is clear. It's an invisible umbilical cord that's so powerful. And that's really how attachment relationships are formed between children and their care providers. And in, I think, an important but perhaps less powerful way between children and the mentors that serve them at the school. So I think it's important to recognize that when kids are turning away, when they're maybe acting as if you don't matter or that you're not really present, that they're really still there. They're just confident that you're not going to go anywhere. And that's an important thing for them to have, that trust that when they turn around, you're going to be there for them. And that the next week, you're going to be there for them, because that's part of that commitment that you made. The other piece I think that's really important to recognize in this scenario is that many of the children that perhaps are sitting at that same table or are sitting in that classroom, they may not know your name. They just know that there's this adult who's there who really cares about kids, maybe one of their classmates, and they notice that. And so the impact we have isn't just on the child we're serving, but also on the children that are around them. One of the mentors who was just completing her year here was sharing how excited she was to have that experience, but when her student didn't show up, other children that were sitting at the table would ask if she would spend time with them also, which I thought was really meaningful, that they are just waiting for that opportunity to also be in that relationship. So think about your time with your child, even if they're not sitting right next to you, is just being aware of the presence that you have in your role with them. As mentors, you're contributing every day in small but important ways that say to children, the parents, and the teachers of the school that they matter. By being there, you're saying that the children who come here daily have worth. They're worth your time, and that you're willing to invest your valuable time to make their experience of the school and life more positive. Because we know that schools are just a microcosm of the larger community, and that people from the community coming into a school, which is a safe place for children, and perhaps it may be the only place where you might engage them or ever see them, it really creates a much richer and a much more meaningful experience for them. I want you to think about your role as a mentor as creating a thread in the narrative of your child's life. It's just a single thread. And any one thread by themselves really doesn't do much, but woven together with all the other threads of that child's experience of the school and the community, the various teachers, the teacher assistants, the other parents, the other children, the counselor, the principal, all of the people that come to that building, interact with the child across the day, across the week, across the months, across the years, really create this very rich and strong fabric that's woven together of all these individual threads. And so if you're thinking, boy, my time is so limited and I really don't make that big of a difference, and how do we measure it? How do you measure the strength of one fiber in a blanket? How do you measure that? And yet we know that blankets protect. They warm, they help us to be safe, they help provide shelter. And so I think about your role as being part of a much bigger picture. And without you, we have thinner fabric. We have a thinner woven pattern. We have a weaker security system for that child. So please consider that perspective when you're looking at whether or not your experience is meaningful. I think that it is very meaningful for kids. Why do you mentor? I think it's an important question, and perhaps you've already answered it for yourself. I think many people mentor because they're drawn to working with children. Maybe they're learning about average childhood experiences and toxic stress and the negative impact that all of those things have on children as they're growing up. And maybe they want to do something, anything that they think will be helpful. I don't think that we have all the answers in science yet about what works, about what doesn't work. We do have some information that we know that those strong relationships between children and care providers, between adults from the community who really care about them, make a difference. As a child therapist here for 32 years now, I can tell you so many stories about the kids that I maybe only saw once, twice, 3 or 4 times, and yet when I run into their families around the community, they'll stop and talk to me about the impact that they made, and I may not even remember their names. It's been so long. So I know that those little touches, those light touches that we have for children can be really powerful. So please keep that in mind. I think the other thing is that we mentor because we can. Wherever we come from, or wherever we are in our roles in this at Gunderson Health System or in the community, we have the time. We've got maybe the calling or the drive or the desire to want to do something, to want to give back, to want to make a difference. There are probably many people who live in poverty, who live in a lot of chaos and dysfunction, who perhaps this isn't even on their radar. They just don't have the energy or the time. Their lives are so out of control that for them to find the time to do this for a child is just not something they can do. So the fact that you're here, that you're even watching this video, tells me that you probably don't have the luxury of time, but you're willing to make this a priority. So you do it because you can do it. And for that, you have my gratitude. Thank you so much for being part of this mentoring program.